Hello, Wonderhussy here, back at the scene of the crime of one of my first YouTube videos. That's right, I came to this spot back in 2016, I think, and made a video here. And well, if you've watched any of my old videos from 9 years ago, well, you know the production values were pretty rough, as was my language. And that got me into trouble on a number of occasions, including, well, the occasion that I made my first video here. Now, as you can probably tell from all the road and truck noise behind me, I'm at a truck stop. And you might be wondering what kind of salty language could possibly offend a trucker. I mean, if you've ever known any truckers, well, they've been known to use some salty language themselves. Well, no, it wasn't anything to do with truckers or the truck stop. It has to do with the fact that this particular truck stop is the last place James Dean stopped before he died. That's right, the legendary, iconic actor and symbol of American freedom. You might remember him from such films as Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, Giant. Well, he was only in 3 movies before he died at the very young age of 24, just 24 years old, right after stopping at this gas station. Now, of course, this gas station wasn't anywhere near as big as it is today. Back in 1955, September 30th, 1955, to be precise, right around 5 in the afternoon. Okay, the story is, James Dean was really into fast cars. Like many young Hollywood actors that get their first taste of fame and money, well, he used part of that money to buy a real fancy Porsche Sportster. Oh my gosh, I don't even know cars. It was a Porsche Roadster, Sportster, some little tiny silver race car that he was taking up to race at a racetrack in Salinas, up towards Monterey, which is another couple hundred miles that way. Anyway, he had just left Hollywood a couple hours earlier with his mechanic buddy who was going to help him out at the race, and they stopped here at this gas station to get a snack before continuing on. Again, this gas station was nowhere near this big back when James Dean stopped here. I mean, we're kind of in the boonies, northwest of Bakersfield, really out in the middle of nowhere. It's farm country, it's oil country. Not too many reasons for most folks to be passing through this part of the country unless you're headed to a race or you want to come check out the spot where James Dean died. That's right, this is the last place he stopped, and it's just about a half hour up the road from the actual place where he died, and we'll go check that out in a minute. But first, I wanted to stop at Blackwell's Corners because they do have a lot of James Dean stuff here, including this giant kind of billboard of his head, and then on the back of it there is a little sign talking about James Dean made his last stop at this corner on September 30th, 1955. The young actor died in a car crash a short time later while en route to Salinas for an auto race. Although he appeared in only 3 films, James Dean remains a legend. Just like I said. Ow, dang it, these friggin' goat's head thorns go right through the sole of your flip-flop. Oh, I guess I should stay on the pavement in these parts. These goat's head thorns do not mess around. Anyway, it's all paved in the way into this gas station and on the way to this other cutout of Jimmy Dean that they have posted up right at the corner that I guess Blackwell's Corner is named after. That's the name of this gas station and I guess this sort of settlement, Blackwell's Corner, right at the intersection of California Highway 46 and California Highway 33. Now, back in James Dean's day, on September 30th, 1955, Highway 46 was called Highway 466, but this was still called Blackwell's Corner. It just didn't have this giant wooden cutout of James Dean looming over it like it does today, standing guard to protect the American ideals of freedom and rebellion. I mean, if you've ever seen Rebel Without a Cause, hello, the word rebel is in the name, but it's not rebel in the southern sense, it's rebel in the I'm an upset teenager kind of way, which is why I think it's kind of funny that people still get so protective of James Dean's legacy, and that's why I got so much blowback for making my first video, which I'll get to that in a little bit as well. James Dean has basically become a symbol of everything that's great, free, and rebellious about America. I just think it's kind of funny that if you watch that movie, he's basically just a petulant teenager. But the argument could be made that he's just petulant because his parents are half asleep, blindly driven by consumerism, and he wanted more from life, as do we all. Oh, look at that. It says inside this gas station, there's a Forever Young fudge factory. Nothing like a fudge factory. But I gotta watch out because I'm pretty sure that very double entendre is part of what got me in trouble in my last James Dean video. Apparently, according to his friends and his ex-roommate, James Dean was bisexual. And so I made some kind of joke about fudge packing, and people got real heated up because, oh my gum, Jimmy Dean wasn't gay. Okay, wow, there is quite a bit going on in this James Dean gift shop. There's the Forever Young restaurant, and there's the East of Eden fudge factory. Oh look, there's a bunch of pictures of James Dean. In fact, look, there's a picture of the car that he died in. That's the Porsche I was just talking about. Very sexy little car, number 130. Anyway, it's actually pretty cool in this gas station because this restaurant is a real restaurant, like an actual diner with that cool 50s upholstery on the booths and a mural on the wall of the greats, Elvis, Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, and I guess, gosh, I don't know who the guy is. This supposed to be Johnny Cash? It's kind of hard to tell because none of them actually look like the people they're supposed to be. Oh wait, look, they do have some pretty interesting stuff in the back of the store. By the bathrooms, first of all, that's what the gas station looked like back in 1955. And look at this. It says somebody found his goggles 62 years later after the crash. I guess they must have been flung into a field or something. Boy, can you imagine finding those? Pretty cool. No souvenirs, really weird. Okay, they did have a couple coffee cups, but they didn't have anything super exciting, so I had to settle for a jar of olives and a Coca-Cola. The olives because I'm actually going up to visit my mom at her new house, and she likes martinis. And the Coca-Cola because, well, it was what James Dean bought when he stopped here on his last ever pit stop. Okay, I guess James Dean bought a Coke, and his mechanic buddy bought an apple, or ate an apple. I don't know, either way, it's so wholesome and all-American. It just makes you want to puke. See, there I go again, saying things that are gonna offend somebody. When it comes to these American icons, you really can't mess around. So I'll just offer a toast of Coca-Cola to the memory of James Dean. Cheers, Jimmy Dean. This one's for you. Of course, the irony being this is a Mexican Coke. They don't even bottle Coca-Cola with pure cane sugar in the United States anymore. Oh boy, James Dean must be rolling in his grave. Anyway, let's cruise down the highway and check out the actual site where James Dean met his untimely end. Wow, how about that? We're basically looking at the same exact thing James Dean looked at just before he died. Okay, it was probably just a 2-lane highway back in 1955. Now there's 2 lanes on either side of a median strip, but essentially the same kind of landscape. They were probably growing the same kind of almonds or pistachios or whatever those are. Anyway, let's put ourselves in James Dean's shoes. Okay, we're 24 years old. We're on the brink of a blindingly successful Hollywood career. We're behind the wheel of a brand new Porsche that we're taking up to a racetrack to drive around as fast as we can. And we're drinking a Coke. Life is pretty good right now. Little do we know, we have less than 30 minutes to live. Okay, wow. Apologies for the abrupt stop, but I wasn't sure exactly where this place was, and I wasn't even exactly sure I'd be able to get here. Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't just come here because I wanted to do a better job on my James Dean video. I actually came here because somebody told me they're paving over this site. I mean, you can see in the distance, they are reconfiguring this interchange somehow, building some kind of bridge over there and some kind of bridge over there. And I don't know, the person who told me about it said, oh, you better get out there quick. They're about to pave over the James Dean crash site. Which, to me, doesn't actually look like an issue because, well, the memorial is a considerable distance away from where they're doing the construction work. You can see people have left all kinds of stuff over the years in memory of, and I guess in tribute to, James Dean. In fact, I'll bet you a lot of this stuff was here when I made my last video. I think I remember there being some bras, which I think is part of what got me in trouble in my first video. I made some remark about, why would you leave a bra for James Dean? He was gay. Well, he wasn't gay. First of all, I didn't know James Dean personally, so what do I know and what business is it of mine whether he was or wasn't gay? But from the interviews I've read with people who knew him, he was bisexual, and what's the big friggin' deal? Who cares? Well, apparently some folks do care, and they didn't like me tarnishing his memory. Boy, there is a pretty interesting collection of stuff here. I mean, somebody hung a t-shirt from the James Dean Festival in Fairmount, Indiana, because James Dean was born in Fairmount, Indiana. That's right. Nice Midwestern Indiana boy. Somehow ended up bisexual in Hollywood. Oh boy, I don't think I'm doing any better job of not offending people in this video than I did in my first one. Anyway, then there's like a Route 66 license plate. Oh, look, an Indiana license plate. Oh, look, somebody from Australia was here. Sydney. Good on you, mate. Then we got a little kind of memorial paper. Dream as if you'll live forever. Live as if you'll die today. Boy, I might actually die today, standing as I am at the side of a very busy intersection that apparently is still dangerous enough to warrant the state of California putting all this money into redoing the interchange. I guess because the landscape is so monotonous out here that it's real easy, especially towards the end of the day when the light gets low, which it was when James Dean was killed. I guess things kind of start to blur, and until next thing you know, a dang silver Porsche Spider pulls out right in front of you. That's what it was. It was a Spider. I looked it up. I guess James Dean had a Speedster that he raced around in a few races prior to trading it in for this Porsche Spider 550, I think, is what he was driving at the time of his death. And it had a name. You know, some people name their cars. Well, his was called the Little Bastard, which I guess was a nickname somebody had given him on a film set, the Little Bastard. So he had this sexy little, really low to the ground, silver Porsche Spider that said, the Little Bastard on the back. And there he was, tootling along Highway 46 from Hollywood, heading to Salinas, when, at the same time, there happened to be a giant 1950 Ford Tudor. Okay, you know what a 1950 Ford Tudor looks like? I had to look it up, but it basically looks like a brick house. It's mighty, mighty, just letting it all hang out. It's a big friggin' car. Some might call it a tank. Anyway, this college kid named Donald Turnipseed happened to be driving in the opposite direction on the old Highway 466, coming from San Luis Obispo, I think. I feel like he went to college in San Luis Obispo and he was going home for the weekend. It was a Friday in Tulare, and so he happened to be coming this way in this giant 1950 Ford Tudor tank, and I guess he was going about 85 miles an hour is what they figured at the inquest. Well, here comes Jimmy Dean racing along in this very low to the ground silver Porsche, and at that time of day the light was already, you know, getting kind of dusky looking that direction, and so Donald Turnipseed says he never saw James Dean turn out in front of him, even though James Dean did have the right of way. And a lot of people go, oh, James Dean, live fast, die young. He was probably just speeding, driving too fast. Well, no. I think at the inquest, the highway patrol officer figured, based on the skid marks and, I don't know, forensic evidence at the scene, that James Dean probably was only going like 55 miles an hour. Now, that's not to say that he hadn't been speeding just prior to that. No, he was going as fast as well, the mechanic estimates 150 miles an hour on that long straight stretch back there. In fact, he'd been speeding so much on the trip that he'd already gotten pulled over for speeding once after he left Hollywood, and I think he was coming over the Grapevine or somewhere down there. He got pulled over for speeding, ironically, mere hours before he died in a car crash. Anyway, Donald Turnipseed was blazing along this way at 85 miles an hour when he came up to this little interchange here, actually right there in front of me. I guess he was intending to turn left, and to turn left you have to cross the oncoming lane of traffic. Well, James Dean was in that oncoming lane of traffic, supposedly only going 55 miles an hour, but Donald Turnipseed said he never saw him and basically plowed right into him. Although, again, analyzing the skid marks and the forensic evidence at the crime scene, they figure he did try to brake for something like 40 yards before the impact. And James Dean did try some kind of evasive maneuver, and some say that his last words were, "He's got to see me, right?" But no one can know if those were his last words or not, because the mechanic that was in the car with him did survive the crash, but he was unconscious for quite a while after that, and then he had no memory of the time before, during, or after the crash. And now he too has passed away, so we'll probably never know exactly what James Dean's last words were, but some say they were, "He's gotta see me, right?" Or something like that. Anyway, Donald Turnipseed smashed into James Dean's Porsche just up there somewhere, and boy, the impact did a number on that little Porsche Spider. I mean, that thing cartwheeled 3 or 4 times, I guess, across this field, and the mechanic buddy was thrown free into the field, and he had some pretty serious injuries, but like I said, he survived. James Dean, unfortunately, was trapped in the car. I guess his foot was trapped between the clutch and the brake pedal, and he suffered a broken neck and a bunch of internal injuries, and he didn't die immediately. An ambulance came and they took him to the hospital in Paso Robles, which is like, I don't know, 40, 50 miles from here, and he died. By the time he got to the hospital, he was pronounced dead on arrival, unfortunately, at the very young age of 24. Can you imagine? That's why that restaurant was called Forever Young. And I guess that's why people really lionize and identify with James Dean, because he died before he got old and saggy and wrinkly and jaded. You know, like his fellow Hoosier said, before the thrill of living was gone. John Cougar Mellencamp, also from Indiana. Anyway, James Dean died long before the thrill of living was gone. In fact, he had his whole life and career ahead of him, and it's really interesting to think what he might have become if he had lived. I mean, if you read up on James Dean, I mean, aside from being bisexual, he was a pretty interesting guy. You know, he hung out with this famous goth actress. She was like the Elvira of her day, and he would go to this coffee shop and hang out late at night with her and this other dude, and there's a picture of him playing bongo drums at Eartha Kitt's apartment. I think they're smoking dope, playing bongos. He seemed like he was kind of a beatnik, or at the very least a free spirit. So it's interesting to think what kinds of films he would have made as if he were able to grow older. Now, it could have gone 2 ways. It could have gone the Elvis Presley way, where they both started out fiery and young and symbols of rebellion, and then next thing you know, you're doped up and being milked by the Colonel and cranking out all kinds of crappy movies. Maybe James Dean would have just started cranking out crappy movies, or maybe he would have made some really interesting stuff, especially in the 60s and 70s when that auteur movement in Hollywood came up and all these filmmakers started making very interesting movies. No telling what kind of stuff James Dean would have been in. Anyway, I feel like I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't leave something at the James Dean Memorial. What I like to leave at lonely graves that I come upon in the desert are those golden roses, okay? These golden roses, a viewer sent me a whole bunch. I'm rolling with 2 of them. Unfortunately, I don't have a solid gold one, which is what I would like to leave for James Dean, but I do have a pink one and a blue one, and I actually think that's kind of fitting, because if he was bisexual, or a two-spirit, let's say, then we should memorialize his masculine and his feminine side, right? Well, I'm gonna go ahead and leave his feminine side in the car for now, and bring his masculine side over here to the fence and add it to the collection of, well, gosh, I almost said detritus, but I mean tribute objects, medicine, you might say. I'll put my rose. Oh, I like the look of this old radiator. I'll put my rose right down here by the radiator and the pack of Marlboro Reds. Oh, look at that. There's actually cigarettes in it too. They weren't cheap. It's pretty much a full pack. Boy, isn't that something like $30 nowadays? Anyway, I think that's kind of a fitting tribute. I wonder if I should leave my Coke bottle here. Is that considered litter? I just feel like the last thing he drank was a Coke, and it was almost certainly in a glass bottle. They didn't have cans or plastic bottles back then, but oh man, I don't know. I just feel like it's so fitting. I have to do it. Don't tell the environmentalists. A Mexican Coke and a rose made in China. What could be more American than that? Well, I'm glad you asked. This is the James Dean Memorial. This was placed here in 1977, I think, by a Japanese businessman who was a big fan of James Dean. And I guess it cost him something like $15,000 to put this thing up, which back in 1977 was big bucks. I mean, he must have been some James Dean fan, but you know how the Japanese are. They love anything to do with Americana, you know, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, James Dean, the Holy Trinity, with the addition of Johnny Cash or whoever else that was supposed to be on that mural. Anyway, they love that kind of thing. So much so that this guy, Seita Onishi, had this, I think, really cool, kind of like chrome looking monument wrapped around this beautiful tree. I'm not exactly sure what kind of tree this is, if that's like a sycamore. Oh look, there's his name, S. Onishi. Really cool metal thing sort of wrapped around the trunk of the tree. I don't know if that's supposed to symbolize like the wreckage of his car wrapped around a tree. He didn't crash into a tree, he crashed into a Ford Tudor, but I don't know, I guess close enough. And there was over here, well, you can hardly even make it out now, it's so weathered. It says tribute to a young man, and then there's like a little kind of biography of James Dean, but it's so faded away from the elements that you'd have to do a rubbing of it to be able to read it. But yeah, look at the bottom. I don't know if you can make that out. It says September 30th, 1977. I guess that's the day that he installed this plaque and this memorial. So the 22nd anniversary of the crash. Gosh, it's been so long since this crash now. What is that? 55, and I'm shooting this in 2025. 70 years ago. Oh my God. Yeah, James Dean would have been 94 years old if he were still alive, and it's very possible. And then next to it, there's this other plaque that I guess the same guy, Seita Onishi, there's his name, came back in 1983, 4th of July, 1983, and left kind of a PS, I guess, with more information about why he loved James Dean. Boy, I wonder if Seita Onishi is still alive. Well, if he is, and if he happens to be watching, salute and respect. I love the monument you paid for, and it was in the parking lot of this really cool ranch cafe, which sadly is boarded up and closed down now, but you can maybe still make out on the old sign it was called the Jack Ranch Cafe. And I actually did go in there once. Believe it or not, I've been coming to this site on and off for decades. I think the first time I came out here was in the 1990s. A friend and I drove down from the Bay Area, and it's not exactly a short drive. We spent all day, we drove down here, we had lunch in that cafe, and then we basically turned around and went back. But it was cool. It was just small country cafe, you know, chicken fried steak and eggs. They did have a little display of James Dean souvenirs and memorabilia that you could buy, postcards and stuff like that. I guess the cafe just dried up because maybe ranching in this area is drying up. Ain't that the way all over the West? But that's why I think it's so cool that this James Dean Memorial is still here standing strong. And I think it's interesting that no one has left anything at this site. I mean, yeah, it's not the place where he died, but neither was that other place. I mean, he died in an ambulance somewhere between here and Paso Robles. So I don't know. I still have the other pink rose, and I'm gonna go ahead and leave it here. Even if nobody else saw fit to leave a tribute here, I'm going to, in appreciation of James Dean, who I actually am a huge fan of, even though maybe it sounds like I'm not. And in appreciation of Seita Onishi, because I like people who put their money where their mouth is and build cool stuff like this out in the middle of nowhere. Only thing is, I gotta wedge it in someplace real good so that it doesn't blow away in the wind. Oh, maybe I'll do it here by this kind of creepy little fallen sparrow. I guess that's supposed to symbolize James Dean. A little fallen, look at that, it's a little bronze fallen sparrow. It's a little, oh, I wish I could make its little feet holding the rose, but I can't do that. Maybe I can just jam it in this crack. Tale as old as time. I don't know, I feel like that's a nice tribute to leave James Dean. Certainly nicer than this syringe somebody left. Golly, oh my gosh, it looks like somebody was out here shooting fentanyl or something at the James Dean Memorial. Is nothing sacred? I mean, I guess that's the downside in these rural communities. There's like a real epidemic. Oh my god, that even looks like there's still something in it. Yikes. Now, I don't know very much about fentanyl. Is it supposed to be that color? That looks like, to me, this looks like the color of Coca-Cola. What if some hardcore fan of Americana, some true blue patriot who bleeds red, white, and blue and shoots up Coca-Cola, came out here to pay his respects to James Dean in the most American way possible? You know, probably, I'll bet you anything, it was a guy named Bubba from one of these surrounding ranches, and he came out here to chug a Bud Light, shoot up some Coca-Cola, and then, well, let's just say enjoy an apple pie. Because is there any more American way to celebrate America than that? Anyway, that's all there is to this lonely James Dean Memorial right next to the old, lonely, abandoned Jack Ranch Cafe, which I thought I read online is now a mead distillery. I guess they're not open right now. Maybe they're only open in the winter, but I do love me some mead, and I can't think of anything I'd rather do than chug some mead next to the James Dean Memorial. But unfortunately, well, there's no one minding the store, so I guess I'm just gonna get back in my car and keep on a-cruising through this really fascinating part of California. The Central Valley doesn't get much love in between the Bay Area and the Redwoods up north and Hollywood and San Diego down south, and then the Mojave Desert, Death Valley. Well, the whole central part of California is this giant agricultural, some would say wasteland, but I would call it a wonderland.